Well, if it's Tuesday, boom goes the dynamite. Good evening. I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. Welcome to MTP Daily. As I said earlier today, Judge Brett Kavanaugh and this issue right now is the political equivalent of 4 sticks of dynamite wrapped in radioactive material. At this hour, there are so many questions about that bombshell hearing scheduled for next Monday, where both the president's Supreme Court pick and his accuser, Professor Christine Blasey Ford, are scheduled to testify. In fact, we're not even sure the hearing is going to happen. Ford apparently has not yet accepted the invitation. Obviously, this issue is so fraught with political danger for a lot of people. The Trump White House seems to be walking a very precarious line. They're sending signals, at times awkwardly, that they will defend Kavanaugh, but they've also sent signals that they may have to cut him loose. Here's the president speaking to reporters at the White House this afternoon.
I feel so badly for him that he's going through this, to be honest with you. I feel so badly for him. This is not a man that deserves this. This should have been brought to the fore. It should have been brought up long ago. With all of that, I feel that the Republicans, and I can speak for myself, we should go through a process because there shouldn't even be a little doubt. Hopefully, the woman will come forward, state her case. He will state his case before representatives of the United States Senate, and then they will vote. And we will see what happens.
The president also said that the FBI told him they were not interested in investigating the allegations. But folks, as the president defends Kavanaugh, there are also signs that the White House is extremely wary of the political danger that he may pose to the GOP. Kavanaugh has spent the better part of 2 days huddling at the White House. But the president told reporters today that this is Kavanaugh's fight, not his. In fact, the president said today he wouldn't even speak to Kavanaugh while he's been at the White House.
I think specifically, I haven't wanted to speak to Judge Kavanaugh because I knew somebody would ask me the same question that you asked me. Have you spoken to Judge Kavanaugh? So specifically, I thought it would be a good thing not to. He can handle himself better than anybody. He's a very outstanding man.
President Trump also said he was okay with delaying this confirmation vote, so, quote, both sides can be heard. But he may not have much of a choice. Mitch McConnell is a shrewd political operator. If he had the votes right now, what do you think he'd be doing with the Kavanaugh nomination? He probably would already have it through committee. But we've heard more than a few Senate Republicans in the past 24 hours waver a bit.
If the allegation was true, would it be disqualifying for him as a nominee?
The allegation is proven to be true, of course.
If the incident occurred as she described it, that would be disqualifying. That's why we're having this hearing.
We have, in the past, changed our minds on judges in the past. You saw that several weeks ago where members of the Republican conference changed their minds on a judge at the last minute because of additional information that we found.
Obviously, if Judge Kavanaugh has lied about what happened, that would be disqualifying.
Compounding matters, Kavanaugh may have committed a few unforced errors himself. We don't know that yet, but he's allowed the White House to basically serve as his political war room. Perhaps not the best look for a judge facing questions about his fealty to the president. Kavanaugh also may have issued an overly broad denial. In addition to denying the allegations of sexual assault, he's also denied being at the social gathering where Ford alleges the assault took place. Moments ago, one of the alleged witnesses put out a statement through his lawyer saying he has, quote, no memory of this alleged incident, and he doesn't want to speak publicly about it. But folks, if evidence surfaces between now and Monday merely contradicting Kavanaugh's denial about being at the social gathering, does that mean he can't recover from that? Let's bring in tonight's panel. Danielle Pletka, Vice President of the American Enterprise Institute and an NBC News contributor. Cornell Belcher, a Democratic pollster and an MSNBC political analyst. And Shane Harris, National Security Correspondent at The Washington Post. Well, your newspaper is what launched this, who took something that had been a rumor and hearsay. And obviously, the big question is, where is Professor Ford?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I do not know. Let me just make that very clear, and I wasn't reporting on the story. But I think this is sort of this moment of suspense that we're now in. This hearing is set for Monday. If she doesn't show up, does the hearing still go forward? Does that wreck her credibility? If she gives a private interview, will that be sufficient for everyone? I mean, these are still the terms that are being negotiated, but it seems to me that this is this whole new process that the Senate now finds itself trying to work its way through, and we're watching that kind of improvisational tribunal aspect go on now. She kind of holds all the cards, I think, in some respects. I mean, she could probably dictate the terms of how she wants to give her appearance. She could do it privately. Republicans have already said that. But wow, if the two of them show up on Monday, that is going to be the metaphor you use, the radioactive dynamite. It's something we've really never quite seen anything like this before.
Not in this era.
Not in the Me Too era.
Not in the Me Too era. Danny?
I guess I'm the only woman sitting here, and I remember high school well. I can't tell you every party I went to, but I sure wouldn't take the stand against somebody based on the memory of a party that I went to 40 years ago and seek to destroy their career, never having stepped up once during this process. I think the right question for us to ask is, okay, if this is true, this is serious, and this person deserves to be taken seriously, but how do we prove that it's true? And that notion of due process, that in fact this has to be proven, is what Judge Kavanaugh deserves. We seem to have all forgotten that.
Cornell.
You know, it's a tough thing, right? And I hear you on many aspects of that. But at the same time, how many times have we seen women, take the Bill Cosby case, for example, all these women who didn't show up and didn't turn, why didn't they come forward, right? Again, I'm a man, I can't speak on this, but apparently it's a really difficult and tough thing. I think we have to hear her out. And hear what she has to say, right? The idea that I don't remember from high school. Look, if I sexually assaulted a woman in high school, I'm going to remember it, right? And if you were sexually assaulted in high school, you're going to remember it, right? It's a traumatic thing. This is explosive. And what's striking to me also is you have a White House here who's stepping back from it. And why is this White House stepping back from it? Because you have a president with zero credibility in this space. This is a president who cannot ride to your defense in this area.
I have to say, we're getting a preview, though, of what, it's interesting to me, the Senate has been actually playing cooling saucer a bit, because the TV ad wars, not so much. First, here's what Demand Justice, a group from the left, is putting up on the air, and then we're going to play for you an ad that a group from the right is putting on the air. Obviously, one opposes Kavanaugh, and one supports him. Take a look.
You can do anything. Grab him by the...
An admitted sexual abuser sits in the White House who supported an accused child predator for the Senate.
So get out and vote for Roy Moore.
Then he nominated this man to the U.S. Supreme Court,
accusing Kavanaugh of sexual assault. When she tried to scream, she said he put his hand over her mouth.
We can't let Brett Kavanaugh decide on our rights for a generation. Enough is enough.
From Demand Justice, a group from the left, and you saw Trump, Roy Moore, and then Brett Kavanaugh. Now here is from a group from the right, the Judicial Crisis Network, supporting Brett Kavanaugh.
I've been friends with Brett Kavanaugh for 35 years. I never thought about doing a TV commercial. I'm not involved in politics. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I believe that we need to have bright, curious, open-minded, thoughtful, empathetic people who are judges. And I trust that Brett is that person.
As you can see, this is not going to be fact-based. This is going to be feeling-based. Let's be realistic here. People are going to let their feelings decide who's telling the truth.
That's right. And you mentioned, Annie, due process being afforded to the judge here. And I think that we all would, hope that in a situation like this, people would aspire to those kinds of levels. But that's not what's going to happen here. This is a committee that gets to decide for itself, for whatever reasons it wants to confirm or not confirm this judge. And the fact that you see them, I think, wavering so quickly, even with just the allegation gives you a very good sense of where the barometer is.
Well, this is going to be played out. You know, it's going to be played out in the court of public opinion. And full disclosure, I've worked for Demand Justice. They were. I
didn't know that, but thank you for telling us.
But yes, from both sides. So this is also why big money is corrupting our system, where you have all these outside special interest groups, and they can spend as much money as they possibly want, and then it becomes a battle in the public space. When, quite frankly, I think it is a disservice to our democracy.
We know it's wrong. We know this isn't the right way to have this
but I want
conversation.
to come back to something that Cornell said, because I think it's really, really important. You know, Donald Trump, we know. We've seen him, right? We've seen him again and again and again have no respect for women, make crude comments about women, hang around with, what do we call them now, porn actresses. We know.
I just think, no, I just think you have
porn
to,
star.
I just think you have to prove you're a star before we call you one.
I think that's absolutely true. But we know that, okay? We know in the case of Bill Clinton that, you know, that's a man who likes to look at the ladies. We've seen pictures of him doing that in the last month at a funeral, okay? And I think that's the difference between the Cosby case and this. This is the word of one person, and I never want to dismiss the pain of an individual. I never want to say that you should be afraid to come out. I have to question the fact that there's no other evidence, and that we are watching commercials about this man as if he is a serial rapist. You know, someone once said, "Where do I go to get my reputation back?" That's a reasonable question to ask.
But what if? And I hear all that, and I have to respect it. But what if she's right? You know, what if this has validity? Should she not have her day? Is because it was 30 years ago? Does that mean she shouldn't bring it up? She shouldn't bring it up right now. I think it's a tough place to be, and too often in our society, women have not had their moment. You know, even if women who've been done wrong have not had their moment. I think sometimes the Me Too moment can go too far, but I think it goes too far in one direction because we've gone too far historically in the other direction.
That doesn't mean serving justice on somebody who did nothing wrong. I understand that people want redress, but that doesn't mean serving justice on somebody like that, and they deserve due process.
Let's talk about what I think is also the peril for pretty much. What are there, 100 current U.S. senators? We're in the 100. I'm trying to think. We're at 99 or 100.
No, we're at 100.
It's fraught with peril, especially for those that have been through this a second time. Here was Orrin Hatch. I'm going to play for you 2 clips. It's Orrin Hatch then and now, and it just shows you how easily you can step in I'll call it a pothole, if you will, on this issue. Orrin Hatch in 91, Orrin Hatch yesterday. Here it is.
One woman's allegations that are 10 years old against your lifetime of service over that same 10-year period. I've known you almost 11 years. And the person that the good professor described is not the person I've known.
Whoever she is mixed up. But I can't speak for her. All I can say is, no, I don't. I know the judge very, very well. I know how honest he is. I know how straightforward he is. I know how he stands up for what he believes and what's right. And frankly, if you were going to believe anybody, you'd believe him.
Look, to defend the senator here a little bit, he's chosen to speak about somebody's character. At the end of the day, there's a lesson a lot of us have learned in our business, all of these businesses. You don't know what you don't know about somebody. A professional relationship is not a personal relationship, Shane.
That's right. And you heard him even say, "I'm not going to speak for her, but she's mixed up." So
it's that's what happens. That is what creates the political. It's like with the president today. I feel sorry for him. Here's the thing: if it's not true, I understand you saying that. Show empathy for everybody right now.
Right. And Orrin Hatch is, he's Orrin Hatch.
But that's the peril here. That's what we've all learned in Me Too.
Sure.
How many people do we know that have spoke up well for Bill Cosby over the years that regret it?
And I think the committee gets that. The committee is not where Orrin Hatch is, frankly.
We had him on their show. I've done interviews with him. I lifted him up somehow as a figure of fatherhood on a radio show. I mean,
Absolutely.
Okay, we
love the guy.
I'm not going to be somebody's character witness if I don't know him.
And we pretend that we know people, right? I mean, I suppose this happens with celebrity all the time, and I'm sure for many of these senators, judges are maybe kind of in that same vein of, well, you embody the virtues and the moral character that I think is good and the judges should
They're also on their best
so
behavior.
I must know you. But you don't know these people. You don't know what they do in the dark corners of their life.
And I don't want to.
Right. Well, the question is then, when does it become relevant? And the answer to that is when the Senate Judiciary decides that it's relevant.
We haven't talked about how much power this gives people, individuals. You know, I could turn around and say anything. I could say anything about any one of us, about anyone I've worked with. And people would say, well, you know, that certainly deserves a hearing. Okay, but maybe we need to have standards about this. Maybe we all need to agree as a society that there are rules that we want to play by, and that throwing accusations is a dangerous road to go down.
The judiciary, let's be realistic. The larger issue is this whole process is broken.
Yeah.
All right, the judicial nomination process is broken. They can't handle this.
No.
But they can't handle anything these days, it seems like, Cornell.
No. Well, and it's happening in a backdrop of a midterm election where women are already upset.
That's right. I'm going to leave it there. Danielle, Cornell, Shane, stick around. With a sticky subject, you guys were a fabulous panel there, an important discussion. Up next, I'm going to talk to a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, a Republican, John Kennedy of Louisiana. So keep it here. Welcome back. 6 days until Judge Brett Kavanaugh is set to appear again before the Senate Judiciary Committee, we think. So joining me now is one of the members of that committee. It's Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks, Chuck.
And I said we think because I think we don't know if this hearing, I know it's scheduled, but do you have an update of what you know about whether Dr. Ford is going to participate in this hearing yet?
As of 12:15, when a number of the Republican members of the committee met with staff, with our staff, they had tried repeatedly to reach Professor Ford's attorney, I think Ms. Katz, and hadn't been able to get through, hadn't heard back from her. We met, by we, I mean the Republican members of the committee met yesterday, decided we wanted to have a hearing, a public hearing.
Right.
We offered Thursday or Monday to our Democratic colleagues. I don't know who made the decision, but it was decided to do it on Monday. Today we got an update, and the only change that I know of is that we agreed to tell Professor Ford that if she would rather do it in a private hearing, she can do it in a private hearing. It's her choice, public or private.
Any reason why they scheduled the hearing before finding out if she was available?
Well, you've got to start somewhere, and the normal way that the Senate committees work, at least it's been my experience, is they set a date, and they say, okay, here's the date, and we expect everybody to be here. That's why, in part, not totally the reason, but in part why we gave Professor Ford 2 different dates.
Is there a deadline in your mind for her to agree, or do you feel as if this should be scheduled until you gavel the hearing, and if she's not there, then the hearing doesn't happen? Or when do you reassess whether this hearing should take place?
Well, I want to see what happens Monday. I hope Professor Ford comes. Judge Kavanaugh will be there. He's told me that personally. I mean, the process, as you know, is pretty much over. The confirmation hearing is over. The confidential session that the senators have with the nominee is over. The FBI background investigation is over. The time period to submit written questions is over. Professor Ford has made these allegations. They should be taken seriously. I hope she elects to come Monday, and frankly, I hope she elects to do it in a public hearing. I think it's important for the American people to hear both Judge Kavanaugh and Professor Ford, but I don't know whether she's going to come or not.
You know, it's been interesting about this, whether this should be public or private. Judge Kavanaugh did practice sessions. He's basically done this before in some ways, very prepared for a public setting. You know, in the workplace, when somebody makes an accusation like Dr. Ford did, you wouldn't put her in front of the board of directors of a company and say, okay, you're on firing line here. It's a tough thing to ask somebody to do, to go public like this. You really think it should be public and not private?
I would prefer that it be public, because I think that it's important for the American people to see both people and judge for themselves. But if Professor Ford says, look, I'm not comfortable in a public setting, I want to do it privately, I'll agree to that. My preference, though, is to do it publicly so that the American people can judge for themselves.
What questions do you have for the professor?
I don't have any questions yet. I want to hear her side of the story. I mean, you've got to start somewhere. Most of the news that I'm a United States Senator, I was elected by my people to advise and consent, and all the information I have so far is coming out of the New Yorker and the Washington Post, and they're both fine periodicals, but I'd kind of like to hear it from Dr. Ford, hear her story, and then I want to hear the response of Judge Kavanaugh. Every senator, I understand, if the proceeding is held as it normally is entitled to ask questions. I don't have a list of questions prepared like I had for Judge Kavanaugh. I'm not interested in a cross-examination or a cultural or political combat. I'm interested in letting Dr. Ford have her say. I want to hear what she has to say.
I'm sure this is not easy to articulate, so I'm giving you an out already. But how do you judge when you decide someone is telling the truth or not? And obviously you have to make an assessment. You're going to listen to her story. You've read the Washington Post. Obviously you want to hear it straight from her, not just through the Washington Post. What goes through your head when you decide someone's telling the truth?
Well, I've never been on a jury. I've always wanted to serve on a jury, but I'm an attorney, and a lot of times the other attorneys will strike an attorney from a jury pool. I just want to hear how sincere. I just want to hear what the facts are. How much she remembers. Is she sincere? I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's sort of like people watching this interview. You know, some people are going to say, well, Kennedy's full of bull, or some people will say, well, he made a good point or a bad point. I don't think there's any rational process. It's just sort of a human
Let me ask you this. The allegation obviously is troubling enough to you that you think you need to hear more from her. If her story's credible to you, does that have an impact on your vote?
Well, of course it does. But we're not there yet. I mean, I don't have enough. I've been asked all day, and I understand why, to speculate. Well, what if this happens, and what if she says this, and what if he says that? And I honestly don't know. I just know what I've read in the media. I'm not saying I don't trust the media, but I've got to cast a vote here, and what appears to be a fine person has made I don't know her, but she's a professor at an important university, has made a very serious allegation against a nominee that I was very impressed with. And I want to hear from both of them and give them both the opportunity. I'd rather do it in public because I think the American people need to hear it. But if Professor Ford wants to do it privately, and I can understand why she might, I'll do it privately. I'll do it whenever, within reason, whenever she wants to do it. But everybody has to understand this is not the start of this process. It's at the very end. And are there going
to be other witnesses? I saw that there was some thought of other witnesses, perhaps Mr. Judge, who she said was an eyewitness. I know he put out a letter, but do you want other witnesses at this hearing?
You know, I want to hear from I'm told we're not supposed to use these terms, but the accused and the accuser. I think I'm being fair to both of them. I want to start with them, but I don't have enough information to decide whether we need to have other witnesses. I just know secondhand what the allegations are. I need to hear the allegations from the person making them.
Have you asked Brett Kavanaugh directly, since he's reached out to you, whether any of this is true?
Yes, I have.
And what was his answer to you?
Very firm, no, absolutely not. He is He's committed. I mean, he wants to come testify. I think he would do it this afternoon if we could get his schedule. He didn't hedge, not a bit, Chuck.
Okay. All right. Well, Senator Kennedy, I'm going to leave it there. It's going to be a long week, I'm guessing, before we get to Monday. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your views. All right. Thank you, sir. Still ahead, the unprecedented move in the president's war on the Justice Department. We'll have that next. Tonight I'm obsessed with how decades of presidential history, scandals, storms, and Supreme Court battles have all been compressed into just the first half of President Trump's first term. We're a bit exhausted. We pointed out this morning in First Read. For example, then a woman upends a Supreme Court nomination with claims against Clarence Thomas. Now, a woman upends a Supreme Court nomination with claims against Brett Kavanaugh. Okay, so that's Bush 41. A little bit of that one. Okay, how about then? Special prosecutor investigates the President of the United States. How about now? The special counsel investigates the President of the United States. All right, that's borrowing from Nixon. How about this? Then, an administration is criticized for its response to a catastrophic storm, Hurricane Katrina. Now, an administration is criticized for its response to a catastrophic storm, Hurricane Maria. All right, that's Bush 43. How about a military raid in Iran goes terribly wrong? Now, a military raid in Niger goes terribly wrong. We're borrowing something for Carter. So there you have it. That's just 4. That's equivalent of a White House Greatest Hits Crisis Edition. Nearly half a century of trouble and turmoil, all squeezed into a neat 20-month period. And by the way, I left out 3 cabinet secretaries having to resign over ethics problems, all in one term. And just think, we have another 28 months to go at least. Can a Florida recount be far away?
It's not just going to be about economic growth and running on the economy. It's also going to be about what the other side did to play dirty, to dirty up a campaign, but not do it through campaign tactics, but do it by corrupting the FBI and the DOJ. That is important for the American people to know, and we have to deliver that message going into October. And I'm very, very hopeful that the president will make these additional declassifications over the coming weeks.
Well, there you go. That was House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes last Thursday, and his wish came true just 4 days later when President Trump, citing the need for transparency, called for the selective public release of highly classified documents and texts related to the FBI's Russia investigation. Among those documents he wants released are portions of a FISA application to surveil former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page and text messages relating to the Russia investigation from James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr. With me now is Chuck Rosenberg. He's a former U.S. attorney. He's also a former senior FBI official and a current MSNBC contributor. All right, we put that up there because that was sort of striking that Devin Nunes said this is going to happen and we need it for October, very much a campaign sort of implication that they view this as a political act here. Explain why the law enforcement community is so concerned about what the president has done.
There's an immediate reason and there's a long-term reason. The immediate reason, lots of folks are speaking to this. There might be operational details or sources and methods in the classified documents that we simply don't want to make public. It's tradecraft, and that's never a good idea.
Let me pause you there. The outing of Mr. Halper, who was obviously an asset in the UK, has ended his ability to be an asset, correct?
For instance.
Okay.
There's a long-term damage, too. There's a long-term danger. We share information with countries around the world. For instance, we're part of the Five Eyes, the 5 closest allies in the world in terms of intelligence sharing: UK, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the United States.
The English-speaking Western allies.
And we share fully and freely with them. It's almost unlimited. What would we think if we gave something incredibly sensitive to Canada and they dumped it into their public sphere as for partisan political reasons? How likely would we be to give them more stuff? And that's the long-term danger. We rely not just on our own intelligence collection abilities, but on the intelligence collection abilities of our closest allies around the world, and we promise to protect that stuff.
There seems to be the Office of the Department of National Intelligence put out this statement. It said, as requested by the White House, the ODNI is working expeditiously with our interagency partners to conduct a declassification review of the documents the president has identified for declassification. In other words, we want to slow walk this. We hope the president is okay if we slow walk this. But the president issued a directive. There's no ambiguity here. Obviously, they're hoping they can slow walk this. Is that what's happening?
Well, what is probably happening is they're hoping that, thoughtful, reasoned reaction will prevail. They can go back to the president and say, look, we understand you want all this stuff out.
Here it is. We'll show you what it is, but here's what we don't want.
But there's some stuff in here we just can't release because others have equities in it. Maybe it's the Brits, maybe it's the Aussies. I don't know. I can tell you this, Chuck. When I worked for Bob Mueller and his staff after 9/11, I reviewed hundreds of FISAs before he certified as to their legality and their completeness. There's incredibly sensitive stuff in there. This is not a political game. This is intelligence, and the intelligence professionals care deeply about keeping secrets secret.
I want to play for you something that Chase Sekulow said about how important these documents are to the legal defense of President Trump. Take a listen.
Well, this means the American people are going to find out what this was, what started all this, and what was going on. And I suspect what they're going to find that this was not only is a rigged investigation, as some people have called it, but that it may be much, much worse than that.
What does it tell you? I mean, this is where it's awkward. So here you have essentially the president's lawyers are begging the president to help them gather evidence.
Well, look, without getting overly technical here and overly nerdy, there is a procedure if evidence is classified to declassify it for use in a criminal trial.
Right.
A defendant can take advantage of it. A prosecutor can take advantage of it. It's called the Classified Information Procedures Act. You don't do that by dumping it into the public record. You do that in a thoughtful, studied way in front of a federal judge. And we can do that. We've done that. We do that all the time in federal court.
The releasing of text messages, and he added people that we had not. Obviously, the Lisa Page and Peter Strzok text messages are something that the president loves to talk about. But he threw in Andrew McCabe, Bruce Ohr, and James Comey. It feels like more of a fishing expedition, but I don't, what do you make of this?
It seems gratuitous. It certainly seems political. Now, remember, the text messages are not classified because you couldn't share classified information in that way over an unclassed phone line.
But one would assume it's only supposed to be relevant text messages.
One would assume that. But if they're looking to hurt people, it's always easy enough to take something out of context. To me, this is a political imperative. It's a politically driven imperative, and that's unfortunate.
All right, I want to ask you something having to do with FBI background checks because it came up with Judge Kavanaugh. Here's what the president said earlier today.
I don't think the FBI really should be involved because they don't want to be involved. If they wanted to be, I would certainly do that. But as you know, they say this is not really their thing.
You said that is not correct. That is not how the procedure works. Explain. You're Chief of Staff to James Comey at the FBI, so you know a little something.
And I also work for Bob Mueller at the FBI.
All right.
It's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's not the Federal Bureau of we don't really want to do this because we don't feel like it. Here's how it works. A background investigation is completed. It's sent to the White House. It's for their review and their decision. If something arises, either in that background or later, right, something supplemental, as happened here,
right,
the White House can always go back to the FBI and say, hey, you know that thing we just learned about Chuck Todd? Thanks to you, we'd like you to look at it further. We'd like you to do some interviews.
So it's not the FBI's decision to investigate. It is the president's decision whether he wants this investigated.
The White House can ask for more. And if the White House asks for more, the FBI investigates.
I mean, they don't say, we don't want to do this one.
We don't feel like it. Thanks so much. We're kind of busy, long lunch today. No, it's the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
So this is on the White House. If they want it investigated, they can order the FBI to do it. Bottom line.
Bottom line.
Chuck Rosenberg, as always, sir, thanks for coming on, sharing your expertise. Up next, could Republican complacency cost the party control of both houses of Congress? Believe it or not, we still cover elections around here. Today in Meet the Midterms, we've been telling you about all the signs of a potential blue wave this November. But President Trump's insistence that there may be a red wave apparently could end up backfiring for his party. And here's what we're talking about. There's been a poll that was conducted for the RNC and was obtained by our friends over at Bloomberg Businessweek, and it found out that most supporters of President Trump do not think there's a threat that Democrats will win back the House. It showed that overall 71% of respondents said Democrats likely would win in November versus 25% who disagreed. But among self-described strong supporters of President Trump, 57% said they don't think Democrats have a chance. Only 37% believe they do. Now, why does this all matter? Because the Times also reported on a focus group study by Trump-affiliated group called America First Action, where, quote, conservative-leaning voters in the study routinely dismissed the possibility of a Democratic wave election, with some describing the prospect as, quote, fake news. Well, folks, there is a balance between projecting confidence and lulling people into a false sense of complacency. And now Republicans are scrambling to drive out the president's voters on Election Day. But if you're the president's supporters, you were told he couldn't win. And he won. So maybe that's why they're complacent? We'll be right back with more MTV Daily. Time now for the Lit Panel is back. Danielle Pletka, Cornell Belcher, Shane Harris. All right, Cornell, you're our pollster here. So
I play one on television.
There you go. Obviously, these leaked numbers. This is something we've actually been hearing about for quite some time, this concern. It's just like you dealt with in the Obama era, right, where there are Obama voters and there are Democratic voters, and they don't always overlap, and there are Trump voters and there are Republican voters, and they don't always overlap.
I think that is true here, but newsflash, Trump voters not connected to reality of the situation. But also, Chuck, remember, for core Trump voters, it's not like Trump himself has been in love with Mitch McConnell and Speaker Ryan either. I mean, he routinely goes after them.
It's a routine complaint from House Republicans. Stop trashing us.
Right, he routinely trashes them. So why on earth would hardcore Trump voters be energized to save Mitch McConnell and Speaker Ryan? If there is a blue wave, and I think things are looking that way, although I'm not completely sold on it, if there is a blue wave, part of that blue wave happens because those Trump voters sit on their hands.
Waves only happen when both things occur. Turnout up on one side and turnout down on the other side. Yep. And this is the first time you're like, oh, I had seen evidence that felt like, yes, Democratic turnout was up, but Republican was hanging in there. This shows you some fear factor.
Yeah, but I mean, we were talking about the complacency problem, right? So the Republicans aren't going to turn out. I would say that there's a complacency problem on the left as well, which is you're the most rational I've heard, per usual, about this, which is I'm not sure there's going to be a blue wave. But if you're a guy sitting around and you watch the Emmys, if you're sitting around listening to Barack Obama, if you know that Hillary Clinton's written a new foreword or a new end word to her book, man, these people forget they are the reason that Trump won. They're going to help Donald Trump and his party, I say that loosely, win in the midterms.
I just think it's fascinating that Donald Trump is too persuasive for his own good, right? I mean, it's very convenient timing that this poll comes out now as a way of saying, like, yeah, whatever the president's saying, no, really, you need to come out and vote, right? Forget the red wave stuff, and maybe he clues into that as well. But he is a master at shaping this narrative, and it is fascinating to me as somebody who covers him day to day to see how it's playing out in these numbers, that people are believing him when he says, don't worry, we've got this thing sewn up. Well, and there's an effect.
But I want to go to part of it, which is I had a Republican pollster say to me, look, I'm not counting on Trump because the Trump voter doesn't like anybody in Congress, and they view, when you have this conversation about a check on Trump, they say, ooh, Trump is a check on the swamp. Trump is a check on Speaker Pelosi or Speaker Ryan.
But it also doesn't help you in where most of these battlegrounds are, right? Most of these battlegrounds are districts that are suburban, upscale districts, and more urban areas. And the suburban, and the way the suburban college-educated women are breaking away from the Republican Party, I didn't see that in 2006 in the wave election. I think there's going to be a blue wave. But why I think Democrats still need to work on it is because of those Obama voters, right? Because of those young voters who said, Chuck, I like Barack Obama. I'm not in love with the Democrat Party, even though the Democrats are more in line with them. Right. I think we have to work very hard to turn those young Obama voters out, or we'll have the 2010 or 2014 electorate, and we lose if we have the 2014 electorate.
There's no doubt there. I guess the question is, if Trump plays the martyr in the last 3 weeks, meaning if you don't come out, they're coming after me, does that do it?
Well, you know, I have no insight into how Donald Trump thinks about anything. I just want to make that absolutely clear to everybody, including
By the
you out
way,
there.
I think Ivanka Trump would say the same thing. I mean, in fairness, okay? I don't think anybody can understand that.
So I
Roy
mean,
Cohn.
yeah, he could make the case, but you know, I could equally easily see him saying to himself, nah, you know what'll be good for me in 2020 is to have the Democrats in the House and the Democrats in the Senate. That's a slam dunk for me.
It's funny you say that, Shane. I think he does sort of, he only thinks one step ahead, but that would be the type of step ahead that he would be thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, but if you had Democrats in control, does he understand that if they control the Congress, the torpedo that is coming right at him, and maybe he wants to fight it, or he'll just say, oh,
wait a minute, I always sit there,
them.
Donald Trump has never lost in his mind. So why would that make him fear? But no. But in some ways, he hasn't. He went bankrupt, and people let him, and his bankers let him off the hook.
He thinks he's killing it all the time.
You know, he got a show canceled, and they said, no, it was #1. Don't worry. I mean,
would he turn that frown upside down?
Would he sign an infrastructure bill that Democrats put before him? I bet he would.
Of course he would.
Exactly. But impeachment. But remember. Wait. The Constitution is pretty clear. Impeachment. You know, Bill Clinton got impeached. You got to be convicted.
Yeah.
And I think Donald Trump can feel pretty comfortable. Don't you guys agree with me about this?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
You're not going to find 67 to convict
Exactly.
unless there's some massive new revelation, which, you know, PS.
I will just say this.
What could happen?
In fairness.
Oh, just you wait.
I'm sorry. I think the calculation on all of that changes if Democrats also win the Senate, even if it's by a vote. I'm just saying lots of calculations
And I
change.
said Democrats win the Senate by 1 seat.
Well, we shall see. There you go. We'll hold you to that one. All right, Danny. For now, Shane, thank you all. Tremendous panel. Up ahead, Chalk Talk. Well, in case you missed it, the nation is overwhelmed by all the speculation. Everyone is talking about it, wherever I go. The story of the moment. Which toy will be inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame? Yes, each year the Strong Museum in upstate New York announces a new inductee to its hallowed geometric halls. It began way back at the turn of the century, 1998. Among the first honorees, Frisbees, marbles, and Legos. This year, the nominees include the Magic 8 Ball, Tickle Me Elmo, and chalk. Chalk. Really? The official writing implement of academics everywhere? The powdery cylinders of misery synonymous with detention and, even worse, calculus? Chalk? While hopscotch fans may disagree, I would argue chalk is not a toy. So how did it become a Toy Hall of Fame nominee? Who is behind all this?
Children, they're just like us, but smaller. And good children deserve good toys. But try telling that to Big Talc. Big Talc, the shadowy group behind Chalk. You remember Chalk? Those impossible math problems, those endless detentions, the screech. The dust, all brought to you by Big Talc. Now, Big Talc wants Chalk inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame? Chalk in the Hall of Fame with real toys like hula hoop and ball. Chalk, a toy? What's next? Dry erase markers? That's not American. That's American. Tell Washington that Big Talc needs to stay after school. Americans for Real Toys is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
Oh, Nigel and Mr. Tony, a la cheeserie to you guys. That's all for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow